If you've never experienced a near suicidal depressive breakdown, I can tell you what it's like. I had one 5 years ago. Now, hopefully this isn't you, but looking back, I know it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because up till then, I was just like every other clueless entrepreneur, maniacally focused on success, but ignoring all the signs, moving nonstop from one guru get-rich scheme to another, yet still completely in the dark about what I was supposed to do with my life. But as I say, that was then, this is now, and if you can hear my voice, then you and I both know we are ready to get serious about living the life we love, not just existing in it. But how do we do it? Join me as I work with hundreds of entrepreneurs just like you to learn their insider secrets, what's working now, and more importantly, what hasn't. All to help you, the struggling entrepreneur, decode what's keeping you stuck, enabling you to live better, accomplish more, and truly become the person you want to be. Hi, my name is Bryan Forsythe, and welcome to Radically Unstuck. All right. Hey, welcome to Radically Unstuck Podcast. My name is Bryan Forsythe. I want to welcome you to the show. And let me remind you, this show is not just a podcast. This is a movement in the moment you decide to move toward the life that you would dearly love, the one that you would fight for. That's the purpose of this podcast. And I'm going to tell you, we have a fantastic guest today, Raul Lopez. He's not just an entrepreneur. He's not just a motivator. He's an author. And with that, I want to bring Raul on and go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us why you do what you do.
Thanks, Bryan. I appreciate it. Glad to be on the call. I always enjoy great conversations, especially on the topics we're about to cover. My name is Raul Lopez Jr. I am an author of a book called Heal the Boy and the Man Will Appear, subtitled Learn the Importance of Understanding and Expressing Your Emotions. I think our conversation is going to tap into a lot of what that means as far as my title and subtitle goes. I'm a motivational speaker. I have my own forum, actually. I put on when I bring people live on stage to share their stories. And it's called TAG. TAG Talks Live. And TAG stands for Transparency, Acceptance, and Growth. With those things in our life, understanding, the accepting the things we've been through, helps us grow through them. Sharing our messages with other people, it helps us grow. It helps others grow. So transparency, acceptance, and growth, we're being transparent in who we are and what we've lived through, what we've survived, and what we do now to help others is what TAG is all about. So right now, obviously, we cannot do live events, but it's fun. We're doing podcasts. We're doing Zoom calls. We're doing all kinds of different virtual type stuff to keep getting the message out there and keep helping people understand some of the whys in their lives. So I'm happy to be here, man. I appreciate it, Bryan.
Man, I really love what you're doing. This podcast absolutely it's about that. It's about, providing a platform to help people, live better lives, to figure out what is keeping them from living that life that they would, dearly love. And with that, go ahead and share a little bit about maybe your backstory and how it relates to what you're doing currently.
Okay. Yeah. It's good to start, and it's good to go back and see where we came from, because the vast majority of the people that I know that are in my circle that I work with or coach with, have had a rough background, right? And the industry they're in, or the niche, I should say, that they're in, is all based on what they've learned, what they've survived, the wisdom they've gained from their life challenges, yep. Right? And they survive it, and then they don't want anybody else to suffer with it. And I know that's exactly why I do today what I do, because I don't want anybody to suffer and lived with the depression and the anxieties and that I lived with for so long. So if I go all the way back, I got to go back to when I was 7 years old, actually, because once I figured things out, I learned that there was a traumatic event that I was carrying with me that I didn't realize. And it was when my parents separated. And it wasn't so much when they separated, but how they separated. And I'll try and tell you this story in short. I know we have about 30 minutes here. but what happened is I was very close. I was very close to my father. Born mother and father, a couple siblings. Very close. Just grew up, with my dad. Everywhere he was, I was. Loving relationships. He was my everything. Didn't realize that there was challenges between him and my mother. I never saw that. All I ever saw was the best of him. Right. And so he was my superhero. He was my Superman. He was everything to me. But one day my mother comes home and she says, son, get in the car. We're going to go for a ride.
Wow.
I grew up in California, Northern California, San Jose area. And she said, we're going to go for a ride. And I remember looking out the back window and waving at my dad by and thinking nothing was different. And next thing I knew, I was on an airplane and my mother flew me to Alaska.
Wow.
I was 7 years old. So getting on a plane to Alaska, it was fun. Got to Alaska, snow. It was fun. Next day, I asked, where's my dad? Where's my daddy? And she said, don't worry about your daddy. You're not going to see him anymore. And that shifted my entire being. That there was no comprehension. Those words, the thought of it, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't comprehend it. And I started to feel all of these emotions at once, which at the age of 7, I didn't understand what an emotion was, right? I mean, the way we act, the way we feel. I felt confusion. I felt pain. I felt concern. I felt anger. I felt hurt. I'm just every emotion that you can imagine, every negative emotion that's available started to go through this 7-year-old kid's mind and heart, and just through my entire body, the energy of an emotion, energy in motion, emotion. But I didn't know what it was. I just knew that there was something wrong. And I would cry. I started to cry all the time. And, at school, I couldn't pay attention. I would cry at school and and kids started to make fun of me, and I could not control the pain, the confusion, the sadness, the broken heart that I had. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what emotions were. I didn't know why I felt the way that I felt. I didn't understand any of it, but that's what was happening. And so I was uncontrollably crying. And I was, I wouldn't do any kind of schoolwork. I was just numb. And as these kids made fun of me, I remember I started to get tired of it, right? And I started to feel like, man, something's wrong with me. And, all these other confusion things in my mind at a little young age, well, why are these kids laughing? Had this awakening, but it wasn't a good one. It was, I remember just looking at these kids and them laughing at me, and my eyes, were like fire. And I just stared at these kids and I thought, no one's ever going to laugh at me again. And I'm never going to cry. I'm never going to cry again. And no one's ever going to laugh at me. And from that age of 7, until probably about being 27, my heart hardened. And, I had all these mixed emotions and energy that I had held inside that I didn't understand what they were. And if someone were to look at me for more than half a second, I assumed they were going to laugh at me, and I would attack them in rage. I would just fight. I brought that when we did come back from Alaska. After a while, I did get to see my father, and then I kind of realized and understood what was happening or what had happened. And it wasn't so much that my mom took me from him, but that he was in a lifestyle that was causing, my mother was worried about our livelihood and what was happening around us and the people my father was bringing around. She took us away to save us. She took us away for good reason, but she did the best she knew how. She didn't understand that the way she did it would just break us.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. So, but when I got back and I did get to see my father, and, I love him, he loved me, but he had his addictions and he had his challenges that I wasn't aware of. And so it went from me being taken from my father to my father abandoning me, which just basically gave me more of this internal just terror. I didn't understand it.
Sure.
So what had happened from there is by the time I was 9, I was doing drugs myself. At the age of 13, my junior high school girlfriend and I, we conceived our first child.
Man.
And then at 14, because I'd already been, doing drugs and girls and gangs and all this other stuff at that young age, by the time I was 14, I got incarcerated. And I would spend the majority of the next 10 years just mentally lost, in darkness, in deep depression, full of anxiety that I didn't know, again, what these things were. Looking back and where I'm at today, I understand it, going back and looking at it. but I just lived for the next 10 years, basically incarcerated for the next 10 years. If I wasn't incarcerated, I was on the street somewhere, just doing dumb things that kept getting me incarcerated. And I at 24, I got out of San Quentin prison. I ended up in prison, from juvenile hall to farms to county jails to honor farms to halfway houses, work furloughs. I'd been in pretty much every facility you could imagine. And then the final destination was San Quentin prison. In that world, in that subculture, that's the big time. When you get to San Quentin, it's like going to Harvard for the average, not the average person, but the person that has a college mindset. Yep. You're at the big time now. And, I was there, and really the life I was living at the time, I belonged there. So it wasn't like I was shocked
right.
at what was going on around me. And in fact, there was a bunch of my buddies that were there with me because, for the last 10 years, we'd all started from juvenile hall and ended up there. But I knew there was some more to life internally. I was like, there's more to life than this. This can't be, what life is all about. And I always had, over that 10-year period, these three questions. And they were, why do I act the way that I act? Because I knew I wore a mask. I always acted cool, and I was this cool guy and, fight and whatever, party guy, all kinds of girls and all this kind of thing. I always acted the part, but I knew internally that wasn't me. There was something else. And then why do I do the things that I do? I used to ask myself, because before I'd go do anything that usually got me in trouble, internally something would say, don't do that. Don't go there. Don't hang out with these guys. Don't do these things. But I would do them anyway. So I always ask, why do I do these things that I do? And then most importantly, why do I feel this way? Why? What is this internally? And again, looking back, I didn't understand emotions. I didn't understand that they are an energy and they needed to be expressed. And I didn't know what depression was. I didn't know what anxiety was. And really, not having the ability to understand and express my emotions really is what led me into depression. Next thing I knew, I was, diagnosed with depression, anxiety, not bipolar, but borderline personality disorder and PTSD. Oh, wow. Just based on being incarcerated for so long and all these other, things that were going on in my life. But anyways, when I got out of prison, I was 24, and I was seeking the answers to those questions. And that's the key, as we get into this. How do we change our lives? How do we go after the next life, per se? How do we, when we have that internal feeling of this can't be what life is about? We're not here to just suffer. We're not here to live in darkness. We're not here to be uncomfortable and just always wondering what's this life about. Once we understand and we have those questions for ourselves and we start to seek, is when our life starts to change, because what you seek, you shall find. It says that in the Bible. And it's true. I learned that. I learned that because I started to seek. And what I first discovered was psychology. After I got out of prison, the way things turned out for me, I was in a position where the parole officer forced me to go to college, which was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I discovered psychology. And in Psychology 101, the first psychology class I ever took, it answered those three questions. If this happened to you as a child, you might act like this. If this happened to you as a child, you may do things like this. If this happened to you as a child, you may feel like this, and literally answered the questions. One chapter in a psychology book answered those questions for me. And so I just dived into psychology and I started seeking more and more answers. And I studied all the psychology and neuroscience and just anything that I could study to help me understand those three questions. Why, right? The big whys in life. Why do I feel? Why do I act? Who am I? Why do I do these things? I just tried to figure it out and was seeking, and I started to get those answers. And as I got those answers, I understood so much, and there was clarity. I mean, it helped me in all areas of my life, and even the way I communicated with other people, because I understood why I was seeking these things, that other people were seeking these things too, right? And that's the other thing that's really important for us to know as we start to grow, is that we're not alone. We all have these challenges. So many of us are depressed and have anxiety, and we don't even know it. We just don't like the way we feel. We know there's something wrong. So once I learned that I wasn't alone and I understood the answers to some of these questions, my first impulse was to go back to juvenile hall where I had started at such a young age and trying to help these kids understand these things that I had just learned. By this time, I was about 27 years old over the years of studying and understanding some of these things. And I said, I got to go pay this back. These kids need to understand. I don't want anybody to live in that darkness like I did for so long. So I started going into juvenile hall, volunteering at juvenile halls and just teaching these kids some of the basics of psychology that I had never known. I mean, basic psychological conditioning from birth, what people say around us, what people tell us, whether even if it's good intention, One of the examples I always give is when I was young, my mother would always say, hey, come over here, don't bother those people. Come over here, be quiet, don't bother those people when we're out in public. And I never even thought about it until I was fully an adult and, understood a lot of these psychological concepts of conditioning. But I thought that I bothered people because my mother told me over and over, and she wasn't trying to hurt me or hurt anybody else. She was being polite. Oh, come over here, don't bother those people. Come over here, be quiet, don't bother those people. She told us that, growing up our whole lives. And I remember thinking, in fact, when I had my own daughter, I was sitting out at this waterfall with her, and she went to go kind of play in the water next to these people. And I said, come over here, don't bother those people. And I remember saying that and then hearing my mother telling me that and then seeing these people go, oh, she's no bother at all. She's so cute. And they started talking to her and started playing with her. And I thought, she's not bothering those people at all.
Yeah.
But because I'd been conditioned my entire life, don't bother those people, I thought I was bothering people by even just talking to them, asking directions or, just people that were in public. And I started to put that on my daughter, but I realized it because I'd been studying these things. And I thought, you know what, that was a lie, and my mother didn't do it intentionally. She wasn't trying to harm me or anything, but we are conditioned from birth and by the people around us, and the people we love teach us, so much. And sometimes, even though it's good intentions, they don't realize it. All they're teaching us is what they've been taught, right? I'm assuming my mother's parents probably told her that all the time when she was growing up. Don't bother those people, right? Probably
so.
So we are conditioned from a very young age, and we'll fall into what I called subcultures, like that whole prison incarceration life was subculture for me. And I wanted to go back and teach these kids in juvenile hall that, they're important and they matter and they're not bothering people. And what have you learned? What do you believe? What are your core beliefs right now? Because somebody taught you that. Everything we know as human beings on this earth, we've been taught or learned by somebody somewhere, somewhere else. Everything, right? I mean, even if we're studying out of a book, somebody wrote that book and it's their theory. Right. Everything we're taught, we learn from somebody else. So if we don't control what we're thinking, if we don't control what we're learning, if we just allow anything spoken or given or received to just be the truth and we don't question it, then we're completely conditioned and we don't even know what we're doing, right? We're just following along. We're per se the sheep. And when I say question, I want to be clear, because right now in society, people want to question things, but they're yelling and screaming and arguing about things. And when I say question things, I just simply mean what does this mean to me, right? For me, what does this mean? Is that valid? And really understanding and questioning what we're being told. Imagine when I was a child, when my mom said, come over here, don't bother those people. What if I would have just asked, how am I bothering those people? Or what does it mean to bother people? We probably would have had a big conversation over it. And it probably would have come out oh, you're probably really not bothering those people,
yeah.
But we don't know that as kids. But just understanding and questioning. And I'll tell you, my youngest son, he's amazing at asking questions. I mean, I love the way he does. I have 4 kids. I told you my youngest, we conceived at 13, so he's already 36 years old. I have a 32-year-old, I have a 27-year-old, and then I have my little guy. He's just actually turning 13. But him, I think, because of my perspective on life now, has picked up a lot of stuff from us, and he asks really good questions. And, and I do my best to answer the best that I can without actually trying to tell him what to think, but I really love about him is, if I'm at home when he was a little bit smaller and he wants to play and I didn't feel like playing, he would say, why, Dad? Why don't you feel like playing? He would ask me that question, and I just thought that's so amazing. I love that he asked that, because for a child to be able to ask, why, Dad? Why don't you want to play with me? It helps him know, because what if I say no, and he just turns around and walks away and starts thinking to himself, Like, I wonder why he doesn't want to play with me. Is he mad at me? Is there something wrong with me? Right? We get all these questions, all these why did they say no to me, or what, and we don't know. We don't have the answer, so we just usually tell ourselves the worst thing that we can think. But to ask the question, why, Dad? Why don't you want to play with me? I have to give him the answer. And I forget what it was that day, but I told him, I said, just give me like 10 minutes and, I'm doing this and that. And he goes, oh, okay. And then, 10 minutes later we played, but he understood. He is able to ask the question. So when I say ask, as we're seeking and we're learning and we're reading and we're talking to people, it's okay to ask the basic question, well, I don't understand that. What do you mean? So that we can fully understand it and not have to guess, because unfortunately, until we learn that we can control our thoughts, that we can choose what we want to think, then usually if we're not understanding those things, we're just allowing people to speak into us. I've been going for a while now. I got plenty more. Do you have any questions based on what I've been talking about?
Yeah. So, I kind of understand, making it okay to ask questions, you're having your child or, be able to ask questions. It's really important to give them, really as much choice as is feasible, as far as like raising children. But I wanted to talk about, what you were saying with this idea of being able to, how you relate to thought and, choosing what to think.
Okay. That's powerful. It's really, it's a skill, right? I call it purposeful thinking, right? Choosing our thoughts, and purposeful thinking is definitely a skill that we can all learn. And my mind, like so many others, used to never, until I laid down and fell asleep, my mind would just run and run and run. And usually it's some form of anxiety, because we're wondering about what's happening tomorrow or what happened and I didn't like it, or worried about, a job or an interview, or I have to go here, I got to go there, whatever it is. We're worried and we're thinking about it. And that's definitely anxiety. And then when we're thinking there, in guilt or about the past, or we're concerned about something that happened to us a long time ago, that's where depression starts. So when our minds never stop, that's a lot of where the depressions and the anxieties come from, right? And then they develop neurologically, they develop into PTSD, and then the PTSD can cause the borderline personality disorders, right? So it's kind of a row of the way that things happened for me looking back, and I was just like, wow, I was never aware of this stuff. But what it took for me to be able to understand, and although diagnosed with those four topics that I mentioned, I didn't have to surrender to them. I didn't have to say, like, I hear people sadly go, well, I have anxiety, that's why I act like that. Or I have depression, that's why, that's not, I didn't want to be labeled, and I didn't want to be tagged with it. So I'm seeking, I'm trying to figure out what tools can I use, right? And I saw psychologists, I've seen many therapists for many of years. I've tried a couple of different medications that they subscribed to me that I did not like, right? I do not like the depression and anxiety type medications. For me, they numbed me, right? It was almost like getting drunk and you forget about your problems for a couple of hours, then you're sober again and the problems are still there. That's what I felt like the medication was doing to me. But I remember seeking a pastor's help. I talked about earlier the science, and I studied all the psychology and the neuroscience and all these things. And I understood whys to those three questions, but I wasn't actually healed until that's different. Understanding and healing. I wasn't even healed. I wasn't actually healed until I started seeking God. And with God and with some practices is where I learned to quiet my mind. And a pastor told me one time, a really great pastor, his name is Pastor Francis Selflove. He sat with me one time and he was talking, and I was telling him about, some of these anxieties and depressions and all these things that are going through my head. And he said, learn to quiet your mind. That was what he told me. He said, learn to quiet your mind. And I said, how do you quiet your mind? I didn't even know you could, And he said, learn to quiet your mind, soak in prayer, and meditate. And that's what he said. And I said, well, what does that mean? And he says, just practice quieting down, relaxing, breathing and praying and just soaking in prayer and just stop and, control your thoughts. So initially, I couldn't do it. It took me actually about 1.5 years, almost 2 years to actually be able to really meditate. But the tools that I used to be able to do that was, instead of trying not to think about anything, it was almost impossible. I started to think about one thing. And it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be an orange. I was sitting coaching with a lady one time at a coffee shop, and she had a glass of iced green tea. And I told her, just think about green tea. I said, when you start to meditate, just think green tea. Picture that glass of tea and think of that one thing over and over again. And that's what it takes to start, is instead of your mind running around about subject after subject, thought after thought, and just going, okay, I'm going to think about nothing, think about one thing. And when you think about one thing, so much clarity, there's so much more clarity because you're only thinking about that tea. And your mind will start to wander in the beginning, and then you bring it back to the green tea. That's why you got to have at least that one thought. And then from there, I practiced that, and I was able to really did some breath work, calm down a little bit. And then I started to choose what I wanted to think about. And one of the things that I use is a picture of my son, where he just has this really awesome smile, and I can't look at it or think about it without just smiling, right? It just triggers, the happy hormones per se in my mind, my brain. And so when I would sit there and say, okay, I've been thinking about this one thing. Now I want to choose what I'm going to think. I think about my son in that picture. And then I think about his smile. And I think about, when he was running at Disneyland, when we took him to this vacation, or we took him there. And I start to choose what I wanted to think about. And that just leads into actually understanding, noticing when other thoughts that you don't want pop into your head. Because if you're choosing your thoughts, you're choosing happy thoughts. If you're choosing your thoughts, you're choosing things you're grateful for. If you're choosing your thoughts, you're thinking about a goal you have. It's always something positive when you're choosing, right? When we're letting our mind run wild, it's usually some kind of worry or concern. So as soon as that worry or concern would pop up, I'd recognize it, because now I'm used to thinking happy thoughts. So when something negative comes up, I recognize it, and I'll go, what is that? And I'd pay attention to the thought. And when you're paying attention to the thought, you can address it, because it might be something, important, right? And you address it and you go, okay, what do I need to do with that? And then you choose what you want to do with it, and you go from there instead of just dwelling on it. And that's part of the challenge that a lot of people have, is that they dwell on things instead of focusing on how to fix them. So that's the first trick, the first thing that I did to start learning to choose my thoughts.
Yeah, that choosing your thoughts is kind of a novel concept for a lot of people. It's kind of weird because it's not something that we get taught. Nobody's in school. Nobody goes to school, and the teacher stands up there and talks about how our thoughts are not our own, and how we can make the determination, whether we want to claim this thought or not claim this other thought. And that's one of the, in my book, Crack the Depression Code, this idea that, we are not our thoughts, it plays a central role, because there's a lot of freedom in that once you decide that, this thought that says you should feel this way, or this emotion that says you should feel this way or that. Once you start realizing that you can choose, that you have the power of choice, that you can, do a thought journal or whatever, and literally, address the thoughts and, sort of categorize them and, decide whether you want to basically edit this thought out, or whether you want to support this one, or you maybe want to change this one over here. And so it's a really powerful message, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Hopefully the listener gets that one thing, which is that no matter what the thought or emotion is, I always talk about it at the end of the shows. I always say, run it through the best friend filter. In other words, is the thought or emotion something that you would want your best friend to think or feel? And if not, then, maybe question that thought or that emotion and decide whether or not it's useful, and not whether it's true, because there are a lot of things that are true, There's a lot of thoughts that are true. You may, up until this very moment, have lived a life of complete and total insanity. And, you're the worst person on the planet. But the day that you make the decision, the moment you make the decision to not do that anymore, that is your truth. That can be your truth. And that's kind of where this whole idea of radically comes from, because radically means totally outside of and in spite of reality. And to be able to make a decision to decide to, start being kind to yourself despite all of this history that, most people are carrying around, that to make the decision to be radically kind to yourself, to start there. It's like there's this book written by Kamal Ravikant, and the name of the book is Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And the book is about his struggles. He was this incredibly successful guy, had this business, making huge amounts of money, just living the life. And then slowly but surely he started dying, and nobody could figure out why. They went to all these doctors and all these different things, and there was nothing wrong with him. They could figure nothing out in their tests and everything. And slowly but surely he's dying. And, and so he basically realizes that the only way that he's going to get better is to love himself. And so he decides to start making his whole existence, like sort of running it through the lens of love, of this idea of self-love. And what happened was, of course, because he wrote the book and he's perfectly fine now and he's living this amazing life once again, was that by starting with self-love and stepping away from many of the things in his life that, for whatever reason, weren't actually serving him, this radical self-love, this radical self-kindness literally saved his life.
Outstanding. Yeah. Self-love. That's another huge topic. I mean, we could talk for another hour on that one. It's valid. I mean, it's huge. It's important. It's just as important as understanding, some of the things that we've talked about already, some of these questions that we have for ourselves, understanding that we are conditioned from birth. Self-love is huge, and it's a topic that maybe we can do another a whole podcast on, because there's so much to talk about self-love, and the biggest thing for me in self-love and understanding depression and anxiety, that, I call it the truth about depression and anxiety, and the truth about self-love is that it's tough, right? Because we're conditioned, because of the raised, because of the things we've been taught. We don't even know, like you said, in school, or a lot of our parents don't even teach us these things because they were never taught. It's not their fault. It's just they're teaching us what they know, and if we can teach our children, it really goes back and starts with the children. It's wonderful that we learn this as adults, even if we've never heard it before. And that's one of my passions is to reach as many adults as I can so that they can teach their kids and their grandkids from start, so that they don't have to battle with the depressions, with the anxieties, with these challenges. Because when you understand these things, you understand that you are created in love. You're born light and love. There is no sad child, right? When you're born, you're happy and everything's funny and nothing matters, right? And that's the truth. That's a key point to life. It's very hard to maintain, is that nothing matters. We're here for a purpose. And if we understand that and we seek, we'll start working in it and living in it. And that everything else, it really doesn't matter, because we're here to experience and just understand and help other people. So as much as it's easy to say, love yourself, and some people don't understand what that means. I learned years ago, too, that so many people are uncomfortable around joy, around happiness, around love, because they're so used to being in darkness and negativity. When they're around somebody with that personality, with it's full of love and energy, they're uncomfortable around them because they're just not used to it, right? You've heard the saying, people people meet you before you even speak through your energy. When you walk in the door, when they see
Right.
you, that's the first thing people sense is your energy. And when you're in that darkness, and then you're around somebody who's not, at that moment and is full of joy, it's uncomfortable because the two energies clash, right? They're not the same. So understanding self-love and understanding your emotions, like I had mentioned, emotions are an energy. They have to be expressed. If we don't express them, that's when we start to get into the darkness. And the example I always give is when you're watching your favorite sports team, if they score, you don't just sit there and keep watching. You celebrate. Your hands go in the air. You jump up and down. Something when your team scores. That's energy. You have to release it. You can't sit there. I mean, you can if you force yourself to, right? If you force yourself to, that's what's unhealthy. And unfortunately, when we get angry, that's usually what we do is we hold it in, right? Somebody says something or somebody does something happens and we're so angry about it and we just hold it in instead of how we release joy. We hold in the anger and that starts to create darkness. I mean, that can create physical disease in our bodies because, everything in layman's terms is a hormone triggering, right? When we're happy, there's a certain hormone triggering. When we're mad, there's a certain hormone triggering in our body. So when we hold in all that darkness, all that negativity, we're constantly triggering these negative hormones that go into our gut and that make us physically sick. So loving ourselves, understanding we've been conditioned, learning to quiet our mind. These things are powerful tools that we can carry to change our lives. And, just as we're talking, this course I'm putting together is for adults, but I'm thinking about we need to make something like this for kids, man, so that we can, my goal in my course is it's for two types of people. It's for people that are living in the darkness right now in that depression and don't understand it. But it's also for those who have loved ones who don't battle with depression and don't understand it. So it can help them, be able to help each other. So hopefully they'll be able to take that and understand this importance of things we're talking about and take it and work with their kids also, because if we get them at kids, man, they're not going to battle through life like we did.
Yeah, definitely. That's, that's one of the things that is really important is to start letting the children know, like there's actually one of the best books I wasn't even aware of how amazing this book was, but everybody knows Dr. Seuss. And most people know Dr. Seuss through The Cat in the Hat, but there's actually a book called the Places You Will Go. That's the name of the book. Oh, the Places You Will Go, and it's really an amazing book for many different reasons. It's really crazy because you wouldn't necessarily see Dr. Seuss as someone who's talking about motivation and mindset and all that stuff. But this book is fantastic because it, for one, there's this a couple of pages where it talks about the inner demons. They're not called demons, but they're like these black clouds, right? And it's Dr. Seuss, so it's super kiddie, but it's talking directly about you're going to have thoughts, you're going to have feelings, you're going to have emotions, and you're going to have to conquer them. These are fears, these are worries, these are concerns. And not only are you going to have to face them, but you're going to be able to beat them. And that, I'm just like, this is mind blowing because if we could just get that out to all of the children that, that you're going to have these thoughts, you're going to have these fears, and they are not insurmountable, that it's possible for you to grow past them. And then the coolest thing is later on in the book, he talks about this, the waiting place. And now he's talking about, the tendency for us to sort of stop and start waiting for the perfect day and waiting for and it's talking straight to the entrepreneur. It's talking straight to, if you want to live a good life, if you want to do amazing things, don't get stuck in the waiting place. And this is in a children's book. And, it's like, I mean, it's really a fantastic book. I highly recommend that book. But
what is
it's
it called?
The Places You'll Go.
Oh, the places you'll go. I'll have to pick that up because I haven't studied. I mean, obviously, like the kids' books, like you're talking about, we read them when we were kids. I've read them to my kids, and then I start to see quotes from Dr. Seuss that really have deep meaning, like you're talking about. And I've heard that he has a book out there before, and I've never gotten it. But I think I'm going to get it. Oh, the places you shall go, or you will go. Okay, I'm gonna look that up because, I think. Like we're talking about helping kids to understand these things, that may have been, his purpose in those books. I don't know that I was able to understand that at that young age, but if we have adults who do understand these things, and when they're reading these books to kids or when they're helping them understand the concepts we're talking about, I think it's as simple as explaining to them, here's what this means and here's what it can do for you. Right. Versus just reading it, because we know so many things, but we don't really understand them. I know, I've seen a pilot fly a plane, right? And I know, what he does, but I don't know how to do it. I couldn't sit there and fly the plane, right? So there's a difference in knowing what people do and knowing how really to understand what it takes to do things. So when we hear something, sometimes we go, oh yeah, I've heard that before. Like I think you mentioned Tony Robbins earlier, and I am a fan of Tony, him and a bunch of other guys. But they talk about a lot of different things, and we can hear it and go, oh yeah, I get that. Like believe and achieve, right? That's been thrown out there so much. It's almost weakened it how much people use it. Believe and achieve. Oh yeah, I know that. If I really believe it, I can achieve it. Okay, I get it. But there's a deeper knowing than that, right? What does that really mean, believe? It's not just like in my head going, yeah, I believe that. It's in your heart, right? It goes even deeper. Like when you truly believe, you picture it and you understand it and you go, this is what I'm going to create. This is what I'm going to do. And I believe it can happen. I know I'm going to put it, I'm going to take action on that. And you believe in your heart that you can do it, then it'll happen. But, when if I was to sit there and talk to a group that have read Napoleon Hill over and over again, but have not taken any action in their lives, and then I would say, you have to believe to achieve, they'd be like, oh yeah, I know that. But are you using it?
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk about on the podcast. I actually had a girl, I think it was Nadine Sobolski, and she works a lot with the law of attraction, and it was really cool because we got to talk about that, and most importantly, just to reiterate the fact that yes, the law of attraction does work, but it don't work unless you do. Like you got to go out and do the thing. You might have to learn something. You might have to go and find people that want to work with you. Their action is required. Not, because a lot of people think that you can just sit in your room and, say all these mantras and have a vision board and all these different things and not take any action. And, that taking action, that's the hard part, and not only taking action, but continually taking action, consistency, that's the key. That's one of the big things that obviously, that separates the people that succeed and the people that don't. It's not that one person's doing law of attraction. I mean, in truth, the law of attraction is always working. It's just whether or not you're getting what you expect, you think you want. If that's the deal. Like, are you actually attracting the thing that you want, or are you still attracting the opposite of what you're looking for based on what's going on in your head? We talked about not about being able to choose, what thoughts we actually want to claim as ours. And, I talk a lot about that in the book, about this idea of the inner garden. And, what kind of thoughts are you allowing in your inner garden? Are they biting? Are they cynical? Are they negative? Are they angry? Or, are you cultivating, dandelions and sunflowers? I mean, are you basically just growing thorn bushes? What's in there? because what's in there is going to literally define what you see as reality, and thereby is going to create reality. If you're carrying nothing but thorns in your inner garden, then you're going to tend to see you're going to see thorns everywhere.
100%. I agree. It's funny. The two conversations I've had prior to yours, the exact same thing came up in regards to the law of attraction. And it is, somebody asked, like, how do you put the law of attraction into place? And the answer was, you are in the law of attraction, whether you realize it or not. You're attracting what you think. You're attracting what you believe. What you think about most is who you are, right? And it's not a matter of doing the law of attraction. It's already happening. It's a matter of focusing and creating what you want, and like we talked about, from the brain to the heart, what you think in your heart is what you get, right? In short, and that is the law of attraction.
Yeah. And it's funny because people, it's like, well, I have to get the law of attraction working. Well, no, it's working. All you have to do is figure out how to get the law of attraction working how you feel like you want it to.
Yeah.
And that may require a little bit of work.
Yeah.
But speaking of work, where can we find out more about you, Raul Lopez? If we want to find out, I know you have a course coming out and you've got your book. So hit us with where we can find out more about you.
Okay. Well, I mean, I everything that I do as far as branding goes, I do under Raul Lopez Jr. just because there's a million Raul Lopez's out there. It's a very common name. So I go by Raul Lopez Jr. and I am a junior. That's why I go by that. But my website is raullopezonline.com. So you can find me there. I also have my Tag Talks forum where I do live events, and that's tagtalkslive.com, tag T-A-G, talkslive.com. And you can see some of the special celebrity guests we've had there in some of our events and how nice we put them together for people to come and share their stories, really similar to what we're doing here now, but live from stage and interacting with audiences. But yeah, raullopezonline.com, raullopezjr.com will take you to that same site. And there's a free assessment on there, actually, if anybody's interested in, a 30-minute coaching session. There's an assessment on there you can take, and then we can go over the assessment if you'd like and just kind of see where you're at and where you'd like to be. And it's called Habit Finder. And it asks, are your habits helping you or sabotaging you? Because if we don't, with all this stuff we're talking about, if we don't recognize that we're harming ourselves, then we're just going to continue on that path. So a lot of understanding and recognizing who we are, why we are. And I can help you with that. So, yep, raullopezonline.com.
All right. And with that, I just want to thank you again for listening to this podcast. I hope that it's been awesome for you. I know I've had fun. And real quick, I just want to ask you to help me out for a second. Go ahead and hit this link, https://ratethispodcast.com/unstuck. And I will talk to you next week. Thanks again. Peace again. Peace again. Peace again. Peace again. Peace again.